Welcome back. Dan Sileo here on the National Football Show. We're going to be joined by Frank Reich, the head football coach of the Colts, here in a few, and we'll get his thoughts on what's coming up here on this Colts football team. By the way, I think Chris Ballard, the general manager, has done a marvelous job at putting that football team together. Look, I said it last year that I thought the Colts, when you look at the roster that they've assembled and put together, that football team had one of the better rosters in the AFC. And, you know, I just got through telling you that some of the teams that have made all of these moves that are adding to their roster, anytime you see a lot of those type of moves that have been made, traditionally that leads to inconsistency when you are trying to assemble a roster. So when you do all of that, again, you're putting a lot of doubt in players and in the locker room when you make all these massive decisions and you make all these new changes to your football roster. The number one thing coaches want to do today in the NFL, when they're going into a draft, they want to build their football team completely from the draft. Why? They've scouted the guy. They've talked to the guy. They've worked with the guy. They want to try to build as much continuity inside the room as possible. And that's what Chris Ballard and that's what Frank Reich have done. And here he is right now, the head football coach of the Indianapolis Colts, my dear friend, Coach Frank Reich. How you doing, Coach?
Coach Sileo, how are you?
Let's go. You don't like that kind of change in your roster. You want your dudes back.
Yeah, well, you're right. Hey, I'll tell you what, we're excited about some of the stuff we got going here. Chris Ballard, right, is doing a great job, and you know we had to plug in some holes. We had some serious holes we had to plug in this offseason, but Chris and his staff, we worked really hard at it and really feel good about where we're at.
How about this, Frank? Let's start there. Carson Wentz, was he always going to be – and I know you have so much respect for Phillip Rivers, and you allowed that process to play itself out on what Phillip wanted to do or not, retire, go into coaching, what have you. Once that decision was made by Phillip and you and him and Chris had a chance to talk, was Carson Wentz always going to be your number one priority, or were you going to look at some of the college guys? How did you balance that?
Yeah, no, Carson was always, you know, when Phillip made the decision that he made, and boy, what a fun year that was with him. So just a quick shout out to Phillip Rivers, yes, because it was a great year. He had a phenomenal year, and just it was awesome. But once Phillip made the decision to retire, you know, Chris and I got together, and it's like, hey, if Carson is going to be available, then he's the guy. Chris and I were both in lockstep. Mr. Irsay was on board with that, so that made it easy.
The relationship that you had with the Eagles, did it make it a little easier in the dialogue, Frank, that you guys were able to have a dialogue going back and forth without having the media blow everything up? Because, look, you know this, in today's landscape with social media, you say one word publicly, oh, he hates it. That relationship really, that had to be a dynamic in this whole dialogue going back and forth. Yeah,
Dan, a good observation by you. That actually, I think, really helped make what was going to be a hard deal to make. I think it made it happen because of the, you know, mutual love and respect for Howie Roseman and, of course, Nick Sirianni being there. And then with Chris and I here, you know, once it became apparent that they were willing to play ball and that we were going to talk, you know, those kind of things, you know, it's going to get ugly no matter how. There's going to be stuff said in the media. So if we can't agree that, hey, we got to work through this in the right way. So hats off to Chris, you know, Ballard, but also hats off to Howie Roseman for how the two of those guys kind of really navigated the front lines as far as that negotiation.
How about this? So once you did get Wentz, the phone conversation between you and him, man, I'd like to have been like a fly on the wall, man. You guys must have been so happy to be reunited again. Talk about that a little bit.
It's almost a little bit embarrassing to say how happy I was, you know. I mean, almost it's a little corny, you know. I mean, you know how it is. You get really close to guys, and you get. I mean, I love all the players, but you know, I got really close with Carson. I mean, I was a big part of I was a big part of the equation drafting him in Philly, when we all worked hard on that deal, and felt like I developed a great working relationship with him and a great friendship with him off the field. And so, the X's and O's is great. I mean, let's face it, I love ball. I love competing, but it's the dynamic of how important these relationships are and what they really do mean to you. That winning is, we know we're in a win or else business, but there is something more to it. It is those relationships that you develop, and so do have a very close relationship with Carson.
Coach, I look at it like this, Frank, that offensive coordinators, and when we were talking the other day, and we had Bruce Arians on, and I asked him about that dynamic going from Jameis Winston to Tom Brady. I said, because you guys, what you just said, Frank, you build this relationship up. You're in the room 12 hours a day with the guy. You're in that constant conversation talking about winning football games. It's more than just X's and O's, isn't it? It's about building a personal relationship, because you have to be constructive, but sometimes you also have to be in a position to tell the kid, hey, that's not cutting it. This is what we need to do to get better. Talk about that relationship that you have with Wentz and why you think the dynamic will be better here in Indy than unfortunately it was at the end there in Philly.
Yeah, no, you're right. You do have to have, like I like to say it, it's like, going to the bank, right? So you don't want to write checks that are going to bounce. So you got to make, one of the ways I look at, you make a lot of deposits. So as a coach, you pour your heart into the player. You give him love, support, encouragement, good coaching. Here's the fundamentals and technique. Do your job. Boom, boom, boom. Encourage all that affirmation. But then every now and then you got to coach them hard. You got to write a check. You got to get something better. And so that's why that relationship and that trust is important, that you can't take it personal. And I know Carson and I have that kind of relationship, that first of all, it's going to be, hey, we're going to collaborate. Like 90% of this is collaborating, player and coach together, players and coaches together. But there still is a pecking order, right? The coaches are still the coaches. And so we make that clear around here, but nobody's flaunting that. It's just the way it has to be. Somebody has to call the shots, somebody at the time when they need to be called. Players are pros. They understand that. So, but what helps is when you've really poured into the relationship and the trust is there, it makes those hard conversations that much more palatable.
Your progression, and I always tell people that assistant coaches in the NFL are gypsies. You guys go from one city to another, and Nick Sirianni now is in Philadelphia. Frank, how tough was that transition? And I've talked to Parcells about this before. Going from number one headset, being the D coordinator, to being the guy and having to manage the sideline, manage timeouts, doing that transition is a lot tougher than people think. When you're constantly, like you said, 12 hours a day as a coordinator, you're talking to Carson Wentz, but you also have a responsibility, Frank, on the other side of the ball. You got a defense too, and you have special teams, and you have your backs, and you're talking to your scouting department. All of that becomes as a head coach. Did you talk to Nick a little bit about what that transition is going to be like for him too, as he took on the Philly job?
Yeah, it is a big transition, and that's why you got to have great people around you. You got to have a great coaching staff. You got to have the support of the general manager, and you got to be lockstep with him. Thankfully, I have that here. We got a great staff here, and Chris Ballard and I are in lockstep. And sure, Nick and I, worked together a lot of years. 6 years in this business as assistants and so on and so forth together. So when he took that step to Philly, we had all those conversations, and Nick's going to do a great job. I'm super excited for him. He's a brilliant football mind. I'm just excited for him. He's going to do a great job.
Who contacted you first from Philly? Was it the owner or was it the GM?
For Nick?
Yeah.
It was the GM.
Huh? Wow. So, you told him you got to hire my boy. Most coaches now,
think of that. Let me think. Actually, I think I can't remember. I did get a phone call from Mr. Lurie pretty quick. I can't remember which one came first. I have such a close relationship with those guys back there because I think, obviously you had 2 really phenomenal years and, winning the Super Bowl together. So, Yeah, great relationship with those men in that organization.
Your off season, I tell people this, Coach. I go like this: don't ever look at just the draft, because these guys, some of these dudes don't even have their helmets yet. Okay, to tell me how well these guys did. You address needs, and then you also look at free agency. And because of COVID-19, Frank, I would think that because you looked at some of the free agents, you're getting guys 27 instead of 37. So because the cap came down $25 million worth, I mean, you're going to get some quality guys. How do you think your offseason went filling the roster up for 2021?
Yeah, I think it's going very well, and it is a unique dynamic. Everything from the draft and the COVID, and there's no combine. You don't get as many up close and personal touches with the players. But then in signing free agents, with the cap coming down and all that stuff, it does create opportunities. I mean, we signed Eric Fisher today, and I think we got a really great player. Obviously, he's coming off of an injury, but that presents a unique dynamic to fill a very important hole. Obviously, we're optimistic that he'll heal quickly and be able to contribute a lot this year. So feel great about the holes that we filled and the players that we acquired.
Speaking of COVID, a couple questions more here for you, Coach. Speaking of COVID here, being able not to go and be around some of the guys that you drafted or workouts and stuff, bringing free agents in. As you know, when you and I were younger, you brought guys in on Tuesdays, players' day off, and you work guys out. That's been kind of slow to a halt because of COVID-19. Having the accessibility, your off-season conditioning programs too, a lot of viral stuff that's out there when you have to do all your Zoom conferences. How's that dynamic played into preparing for a football season?
Yeah, you know what? It's been hard, but it's the same for everybody. And
yep.
Here's the thing that's made it work. A couple things. Number one, the players have made it work. Players have handled it like pros. Following the protocols, all the stuff that that you got to do in a pandemic to have an NFL season, and then now you're in the off season. And it's still, hopefully we're getting towards the end of it, but you still got this stuff that we're dealing with, and we have a responsibility to each other, to the public, right? To do the right thing. So the one solace in all this is, as far as the competitiveness of it is, it's the same for everybody. So, we like to talk about it like, hey guys, this is real. We have to deal with it. So let's just be pros about it and do our job and do it professionally. Do the protocols, don't make them a distraction, follow the rules, and focus on what we can control. And I think I know our players have done a great job like that. I think the league has done an outstanding job, in the last 12 months dealing with it as well.
All right, I'm going to end it with this. I tweeted this out, and Boomer finally, he commented, he goes, please, no secrets, nothing about the elevator with me being it, please, nothing like that. And so I said, no. I said, but how about the Vic Kronberg rides back up to New York with Pete Koch, who turned out to be the Swede in Heartbreak Ridge, right? And he was a first-round draft choice. You hitching a couple rides. We're all sitting in that Vic Kronberg. And here you are.
Those are great memories. Those are great memories. That's what I love. That's what I love about this game. That's what kind of keeps you in it, keeps you young, keeps it fresh. Those relationships, as you were saying earlier, a minute ago, they go deep, they run deep. That's why it's always a pleasure to come back on your show and to reconnect.
Man, we're lifetime friends, Frank. I mean, I've got my boys at the University of Miami, but I'll tell you what, man, all them great guys, that Carl Bond and all them guys, and Coach Ross I still talk to, and I love those guys. We won the 19. I still got it up on the wall up there. If you can see it up there, my 1983 ACC championship that we ended up winning. I have that bad dog up there, and that always brings me back to you. That was a great year that year. Coach, thank you so much for doing this. Always awesome, man. You're always spectacular to me. Thank you, Frank.
Thanks, Dan.
You got it. Head coach of the Indianapolis Colts, Frank Reich. We'll take a quick time out to keep it here on the National Football Show.